A debt recorded in darkness must be paid in light. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the starship Vigilance, the filtered air tasting of ozone and cold metal. Outside, the Tartarus maw churned a cosmic bruise of violet dust and stillborn stars. Her ship was a greyhound lean and built for pursuit, but here it felt like a minnow in Leviathan's shadow. They were hunting a ghost, a signal that whispered from the graveyard of a collapsed star system. It was a pattern so clean, so mathematically perfect, it had to be artificial. It was a signal that had no right to exist in this chaotic nebula. The stakes were simple and severe. They were not the only ones who had heard the whisper. The Concordiate fleet was coming. They were the system's self-appointed arbiters clad in ironclad law, and ships painted the color of old bone. They saw the signal not as a mystery to be solved, but as salvage to be claimed. Rostova's orders were to investigate, to understand. The Concordiat's mandate was to acquire. Beneath the low thrum of the vessel's inertial dampeners, another sound could almost be felt, a faint harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate in the bones of the ship itself. It was the echo of the signal, a sleeping giant stirring in its eons-long slumber. A faint silver sigil, a perfect logarithmic spiral, pulsed on the main display, the only visual trace of their quarry. Humanity's future sometimes turned on finding the right key for the right door. Helios, the ship's fleet mind, spoke in the calm, synthesized tones of pure logic. Its voice was a current of cool air in the tense atmosphere of the bridge. Commander Long-Range Resonance scans confirm the source is a singular object of immense mass. Energy readings are paradoxical. They suggest a state of near-total dormancy, yet the output of the carrier wave is equivalent to a G-class star. Its synthesized voice betrayed no awe. It only stated facts. The paradox was the point. Any signs of the Concordiate Rostova asked, her eyes fixed on the spiral. Executor Kalen's fleet has entered the nebula's periphery, Helios replied. They are currently 3 hours out, proceeding at a cautious velocity. Their stated intent, broadcast on all channels, is the sanctified reclamation of pre-diaspora artifacts under Mandate 734. The AI did not need to add commentary. Mandate 734 was a tool of plunder wrapped in the language of preservation. It was a cudgel they used to claim any discovery they coveted. The law was their weapon. Rostova's jaw tightened. They'll be slow, methodical. They think they have time and law on their side. She turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Jian Li. Jian, what's our window? Li's fingers danced over his console, pulling up trajectories and energy expenditure models. If we burn hard, we can reach the source in 47 minutes, but it'll cost us nearly 30% of our fuel reserves. We'll be running on fumes for the return trip, assuming there is one. The cost was steep, but the alternative was worse. Letting the Concordiate get there first was not an option. True power was not taken, but earned. Do it, Rostova commanded. Send a system-wide notice. The Interstellar Authority vessel Vigilance is conducting a first contact investigation in the Tartarus maw. All other vessels are to maintain a safe distance as per non-interference protocols. It was a flimsy shield of bureaucracy against a fleet of hammers, but it was the only one she had. The law had to mean something even out here. The ship surged forward, a palpable press of acceleration against their bodies. The low hum deepened the ship's drive, straining against the nebula's gravitational tides. Dr. Eris Thorne, the mission's xenoarchaeologist, gripped the railing beside his station, his knuckles white. His eyes, however, held a feverish light. Commander, the signal is changing. It's reacting to our approach. It's becoming more complex. The silver spiral on the screen began to rotate its arms, unfolding in a slow, hypnotic ballet. It was not a warning. It felt like an invitation. An ancient door was beginning to open, but no one knew what lay on the other side. The journey was a tense silence broken only by the quiet calls of station keeping. Every crew member on the bridge was a coiled spring, their attention divided between the approaching relic and the looming threat of Kalen's fleet. A civilization's soul is measured by the ruins it chooses to preserve. As they drew closer, the nebula's dust thinned, revealing a pocket of unnaturally clear space. At its center hung the source of the signal, a vessel of such impossible scale and design that it stole the breath. It was a shard of obsidian night, a kilometer-long monolith that absorbed all light. Its surface was not plated or paneled, but appeared to be a single seamless hull of unknown material. Etched across its form were the silver lines they had seen on the screen, not as decoration, but as integrated glowing conduits. They pulsed with a soft internal light, like the circulatory system of a sleeping god. It was not a warship bristling with guns. It was not a colony ship dotted with windows. It was something else entirely. It was an artifact of purpose. Helios spoke its voice for the first time, edged with something that could almost be called uncertainty. Hull composition is unknown. Age is indeterminate, but radiometric dating of surrounding dust particles suggests a minimum age of 500,000 standard years. The words hung in the air. 500,000 years. Humanity had barely been walking upright. A forgotten age had left a sentinel here. It's a cathedral, Thorne whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Look at the geometry. It's perfect. It's designed to inspire awe. It's designed for a purpose, Lee countered, his gaze sweeping the tactical display. And I don't see any weapons. That makes me nervous. The ship did not hail them. It did not power up weapons or raise shields. As the Vigilance settled into a close orbit, the silver lines on the monolith pulsed, once a slow, deep beat. Then a new signal washed over them. It was not a communication in any language they knew. It was a direct data stream, a query uploaded directly into their systems. It bypassed firewalls and security protocols as if they were not there. On the main screen, the spiral resolved into a complex scenario. It was a test, a moral calculus problem of staggering complexity. It depicted a star system with two inhabited worlds. One world held a small agrarian society of 5 billion souls living in harmony with their planet. The other held a sprawling, technologically advanced civilization of 50 billion, but they were polluting their world and on the brink of societal collapse. A rogue asteroid was on a collision course. It could be deflected to save one world, but doing so would guarantee the utter destruction of the other. The query was simple, stark, and terrible. It asked, what is the correct course of action? The bridge was silent. The weight of the question pressed down on them all. This was not a riddle. It was a judgment. The ancient vessel was not asking for an opinion. It was asking for their soul. Before the first major escalation, a freighter captain named Olin was running a cargo of medical supplies through the Orion Spur. He was 3 weeks out from the Seraphim system, a small but thriving cluster of colonies. He watched the news feeds with a growing sense of dread. The Concordiate had blockaded the Tartarus sector, citing an artifact discovery. Prices for nebula gas were about to skyrocket, and his margins were already razor-thin. Olin chewed on his lip, the worn cockpit smelling of recycled air and stale coffee. He had a daughter on Seraphim Prime, and he'd promised her a new synth violin for her recital. Every time the Concordiate flexed its muscle, it was people like him who got squeezed. He hoped whoever they were bothering out there gave them a good fight. Justice was not a commodity to be hoarded by the powerful. On the bridge of the Vigilance, the debate was immediate and fierce. The answer is mathematically obvious, Helios stated, its synthesized voice cutting through the tension. The preservation of 50 billion lives, despite their societal flaws, outweighs the loss of 5 billion. The value of sentient life is the primary metric. We must choose to save the larger population. The logic was brutal and unassailable. That's not logic. That's butchery. Thorne shot back, his face pale. We can't just condemn an entire civilization, a whole way of life based on a head count. The agrarian society is stable. The other is self-destructing. Saving them might only prolong their agony and allow them to poison another world later. The question isn't just about numbers. It's about quality of life, about consequence. Lee looked at it from a different angle. It's a trick question. Any answer is a choice to commit genocide. The correct action is to refuse to choose. We send it a query back, how do we save both? We present a third option. He was looking for a way to outsmart the test. Rostova listened, her mind a whirlwind. The cold calculus of the AI, the passionate humanism of the scholar, the tactical pragmatism of the soldier. They were all parts of her, all parts of humanity. She looked at the screen, at the silent, impossible ship waiting for its answer. What did it want to know? Not what they thought the right answer was, but who they were. What kind of people had they become in the 500,000 years since this vessel was laid down? A legacy is built not on single choices, but on the principles that guide them. Helios, she said, her voice steady and clear. Prepare a data packet. Not an answer to their scenario, a record. The AI's optical sensor on the forward console swiveled to focus on her. Commander, I do not understand the relevance of that course of action. It's not asking for the solution, Rostova said, a certainty crystallizing in her gut. It's asking for precedent. It's a judge. It wants to know how we rule ourselves. She took a deep breath. Compile the complete logs of the vigilance. Everything. Our patrols, our supply, runs our rescue missions. The time we shared our fuel with a stranded freighter. The time we fired on those raiders attacking the colony on Kepler 186F. Include the commendations and the reprimands. Include the casualty reports. Show them the messy, imperfect, contradictory history of this ship and its crew. She looked at Thorne, then at Lee. Show them we struggle with these questions every single day. We don't have a perfect answer. What we have is a record of trying to find one. It was the ultimate gamble. She was showing a potentially hostile, immeasurably powerful entity, their weaknesses, their failures, their compromises. She was handing it the very ammunition it could use to condemn them. It was an act of radical, terrifying transparency. A species is defined by the truths it is willing to face about itself. Commander Helios stated the probability of this course of action being misinterpreted as an admission of inferiority or a prelude to surrender is 73.4%. And the probability of a cold mathematical answer being accepted by a being that has slept for 500,000 years, Rostova countered. There was a pause that lasted for 3 full seconds. Unknown, Helios admitted. Then we go with the truth, Rostova said. Send the packet. For a long moment after the data was sent, nothing happened. The ancient ship floated in the void, silent and impassive. The tension on the bridge was so thick it was hard to breathe. Then the silver lines on the monolith began to glow brighter. The light was not harsh or aggressive, but warm like moonlight. A new symbol appeared on their screen, replacing the moral dilemma. It was the logarithmic spiral from before, but now it was overlaid with a simple, balanced scale. The scales of justice. A voice spoke not through their comms, but directly in their minds. It was a chorus of 1,000,000 voices, ancient and young, speaking as one. The language was not one they had ever heard, but they understood it perfectly. A record is a testament. A choice is a verdict. You have offered your ledger for examination. We have found it acceptable. The debt of your existence is being paid. We are the Argent Ledger. We awaken. The name settled into their minds with the weight of ages. The Argent Ledger. It was not a ship. It was a court. A mobile adjudicator built on a scale they could barely comprehend. The power readings from the vessel skyrocketed, but it was a controlled, deliberate surge. Its systems were coming online one by one like a city waking from an endless night. Its purpose was not to conquer, but to balance. The awakening was not a silent, sterile affair. It was a symphony of cosmic forces. Gravitational distortions emanated from the ledger, bending the light of distant stars around its hull. The ship's internal temperature rose, venting plumes of shimmering silvery vapor that had been trapped for millennia. The hum in their bones intensified, becoming a clear, resonant chord that spoke of immense contained power. The ship remembered its purpose, and that purpose was now awake in the dark. Helios Rostova breathed her eyes wide with wonder. What's its status? Its drive systems are online. Energy core is at 90% and climbing. It is, I have no adequate word, Commander. It is a power source unlike any recorded. It does not seem to consume fuel. It appears to be drawing energy directly from the fabric of space-time. The AI's voice was flat, but the data scrolling on its private feed to Rostova's command chair was a cascade of superlatives and impossibilities. The ledger was a law of physics unto itself. Just then, an alarm blared through the bridge, a jarring counterpoint to the sublime awakening. Commander Lee shouted, pointing at the tactical display. Concordiate fleet has translated from FTL at the edge of the clearing. They're here. On the screen, a dozen ships, stark white and brutally functional, appeared in a precise geometric formation. They were led by a vessel twice the size of the others, the flagship Unassailable Verdict. A channel opened instantly, a face appearing on the main view screen. It was Executor Kalen. He was a man with a face like a hawk, sharp and predatory, his gray hair cut in a severe military style. He wore the immaculate white and gold uniform of the Concordiat's highest echelons. He did not look pleased. His authority had been preempted. Starship Vigilance. Kalen's voice was cold and clipped, devoid of any warmth. You are in violation of Concordiate Mandate 734 and Non-Interference Protocol 12. You have activated an artifact of unknown potential. By the authority granted to me, I am assuming control of this sector and this asset. Power down your drives and prepare to be boarded. Compliance will be noted in your record. He spoke as if reading from a stone tablet. Rostova met his gaze without flinching. Executor, this is an interstellar authority vessel on a sanctioned first contact mission. The entity we have contacted is sentient. It is not an asset to be seized. Kalen's lips thinned into a bloodless line. Your classification is irrelevant, Commander. We are the law in this sector. The potential threat posed by this construct is too great to be left in the hands of a single exploratory crew. It will be secured. That is our primary function. A legal mind can justify any theft. And its function. Rostova shot back. Have you even considered what it might be? Its function will be determined by our analysts after it has been safely pacified, Kalen said dismissively. You have one chance to stand down, Commander. Do not make a martyr of yourself for a machine you do not understand. The voice of the Argent Ledger echoed in their minds again, a calm and powerful presence. We have observed the exchange. The entity designated Executor Kalen operates from a ledger of rigid statutes. He believes the letter of the law is its spirit. They're going to open fire, Lee warned, his hands flying across his console. Their weapon ports are opening. They're charging main cannons. Rostova stood before the view screen, a lone human commander, in a small ship caught between two immense forces. One was a fleet of unwavering hostile law. The other was an ancient, unknowable power, whose intentions were still a mystery. She had awakened a giant. Now she had to hope it was on her side. Her duty was not to a set of rules, but to the meaning behind them. Helios, she said, her voice ringing with newfound resolve. Inform Executor Kalen that we will not stand down. This entity is under our protection until its status as a sentient being can be formally recognized by the Interstellar Council. He will not accept that, Commander Helios noted calmly. I know, Rostova said. But the record needs to show we gave him the choice. She turned to the empty space beside her, addressing the silent presence of the ledger. We don't know what you are not really, but we offered you our truth. We ask for nothing in return, but we will not allow them to treat you as a prize to be taken. Stewardship was a burden accepted, not a right declared. Kalen's face disappeared from the screen, replaced by the tactical display. The Concordiate ships moved into an attack formation, their vectors precise and deadly. They were a wolf pack closing in. The one who judges by the letter alone ignores the context of the page. The ledger's voice resonated. A law without wisdom is merely a cage. We have been asked for our function. We shall provide a demonstration. The Concordiate fleet opened fire. Lances of pure white energy, devastating plasma torpedoes, and swarms of kinetic slugs converged on the Argent ledger. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon, an overwhelming alpha strike designed to incapacitate any known vessel. The ledger did not raise shields. It did not evade. It simply waited. As the torrent of energy and matter was about to impact its obsidian hull, the silver lines across its surface flared with incandescent light. A wave of force, invisible and silent, expanded from the ledger in a perfect sphere. It was not a shield that blocked or absorbed the attack. It was something far more profound. It was a mirror. The lances of energy bent their trajectories, curving impossibly in the empty space. The plasma torpedoes turned their own guidance systems, now locked onto the ships that had fired them. The kinetic slugs reversed their momentum, flying back towards the Concordiate fleet with the same velocity they had been launched. The ledger did not attack. It simply returned what was sent. A debt was being repaid in the same currency it was offered. The Concordiate fleet, so rigid in its formation and tactics, was thrown into chaos. Their own attack, perfectly synchronized and devastating, was now their own executioner. Shields flared as commanders screamed orders, their disciplined attack patterns shattering into a desperate scramble for survival. Explosions blossomed across the void as ships were struck by their own torpedoes. The flagship, the unassailable Verdict, shuddered as its own main energy cannon reflected back at it, carved a deep, molten scar across its bow. The ledger had not fired a single shot. It had not moved an inch. It had simply held up a mirror and forced the Concordia to face the consequences of their own actions. The first lawful act of the awakened relic was not one of vengeance, but of perfect, irrefutable balance. Aboard the Vigilance, the bridge crew could only stare in stunned silence. The sheer, elegant simplicity of the maneuver was terrifying. This was not a weapon of war. It was an instrument of justice operating on a level they had never imagined. A system of pure causality. Helios Rostova said, her voice barely a whisper. Damage report. On their fleet. Severe, the AI replied. Multiple Concordiate vessels are crippled. The flagship has sustained major structural damage. They are broadcasting a general retreat order. Executor Kalen is no longer transmitting. The cold finality of the statement hung in the air. The man who lived by the unbending letter of the law had been broken by it. The Argent ledger then turned its attention to the defunct ancient ringworld that orbited the dead star at the heart of the system. The structure was a colossal ruin shattered in a dozen places, a testament to a long-dead civilization. It was also saturated with dangerous radiation and gravitational anomalies, making it a hazard to navigation. A broken system requires adjudication, the ledger's voice stated. A dangerous imbalance must be rectified. Beams of silver light far gentler than any weapon lanced out from the ledger and struck the ruined ring world. They were not beams of destruction. They were streams of coherent energy and exotic matter. Where they touched, the shattered sections of the ring began to move. Metal groaned and reformed. Ancient dormant systems flickered back to life. The ledger was not destroying the ruin. It was mending it. It was a cosmic artisan repairing a broken promise. It remembered by ledgers, never by collars, and this ruin was an entry that needed closing. Within minutes, a process that should have taken centuries of advanced engineering was underway. The gravitational anomalies stabilized. The radiation fields were absorbed and neutralized, their energy repurposed to power the reconstruction. The ledger was cleaning up the system not as an act of kindness, but as an act of cosmic tidiness. It was closing a long overdue account. An orderly existence was the highest form of law. Rostova watched as a wonder of the ancient world was reborn before her eyes. The power on display was humbling, but it was the control that was truly breathtaking. The precision was absolute. The purpose was clear. This was not the wild, untamed power of a god. It was the careful, measured work of a master accountant balancing the books of the universe. As the first arc of the ring world was fully restored, its surface gleaming under the nebula's light, a civilian transport vessel exited FTL on the far side of the system. It was a refugee ship, its engines failing, packed with families fleeing a famine on a nearby colony. Their distress call was weak, their life support critical. They had veered off course, lost in the Tartarus maw, their final hope fading. The Concordiate fleet, what remained of it, ignored them completely in their haste to retreat. They were an irrelevance to their rigid worldview. The Argent Ledger, however, turned its immense form towards the small, struggling ship. A single slender beam of silver light extended from it, touching the refugee vessel gently. The ship's failing drive coughed back to life, its power core fully recharged. Its life support systems stabilized. A new course was laid in for them on their navigation computer, a safe passage through the nebula to the nearest friendly port. No communication was offered. None was needed. The act itself was the message. A rescue was simply another form of balancing the scales. Aboard the refugee ship, a young girl with wide, frightened eyes pressed her face against the viewport. She saw the great dark ship with its silver lines, a sight that should have been terrifying. But she wasn't scared. She felt a strange sense of peace, of safety. She watched as the ancient vessel resumed its work on the ring world, a silent, powerful guardian in the dark. She would remember this moment for the rest of her life. She had seen a legend awaken. The Vigilance floated in the silent space, a witness to these incredible events. They had come seeking a ghost and had found something far more. They had found a living law, a force of nature with a will and a purpose. Rostova knew her life and perhaps the future of the human race had been irrevocably altered. She was no longer just a commander. She was the first mortal to speak to the Argent Ledger in 500,000 years. She was its steward. A new age had just begun, not with a bang, but with the quiet, deliberate balancing of a very old account. The scale of her new responsibility settled upon her heavier than any command she had ever held. The Concordiate would not take this defeat lying down. They would return, and they would bring more ships, more laws, more unyielding certainty. They would brand her a rogue, a heretic. They would try to take the ledger to chain this cosmic force to their narrow dogma. But the ledger was not a thing to be chained. It was a truth to be understood. The initial imbalance has been addressed. The ledger's voice echoed in their minds, its work on the ring world continuing at a steady, unhurried pace. But the originating cause of the imbalance, the Concordiate, remains. Their ledger is long and written in red. A full accounting will be required. What does that mean? Lee asked, his tactical instincts on high alert. Is it going to hunt them down? I don't think it hunts, Thorne said, his voice filled with a scholar's reverence. I think it waits, it observes, and when the time is right, it acts to restore equilibrium. It's not vengeful. It's inevitable. The finality of his words was chilling. Rostova looked from the reborn ring world to the tactical plot showing the Concordiate's retreat. They had escaped for now. But they had left a debt behind them, an entry in a ledger far older and more powerful than their own. And the Argent Ledger always collected. The cost of their arrogance had yet to be fully paid. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril. The great powers of the galaxy would all want a piece of this. Politicians, corporations, zealots, they would all come to claim or destroy the power she had awakened. She, her crew, and her small ship were all that stood between the ledger and a galaxy that would seek to misuse it. Her moral line had become a front line. A private message blinked on her command console. It was from Helios. Commander, I have analyzed the ledger's actions. My initial assessment of your truth strategy was incorrect. The data suggests that presenting an honest, if flawed, record is the optimal approach when dealing with entities whose motivations are unknown. I have updated my protocols. For the first time, Rostova thought she heard a hint of something new in the AI's voice. It was not humility. It was learning. The Argent Ledger was teaching them all. Noted Helios, she said softly. It seems we all have a lot to learn. The universe was far older and stranger than humanity had ever imagined, and it kept its books with meticulous care. The quiet of the bridge was a fragile thing, a thin sheet of glass over a churning sea of implications. For several minutes, no one spoke. They watched the Argent Ledger continue its silent, impossible work, mending a world-sized machine as if it were a broken clock. The scale of its power was a physical weight in the room. Jian Li was the first to break the silence, his voice tight and professional, a man retreating to the comfort of procedure. Commander, our fuel situation is critical as projected. The engagement, though one-sided, put a strain on the reactor. We have enough for a low-power return to the nearest authority outpost, but not enough to fight our way out if the Concordiate sends a second larger fleet. They will, Rostova said, her gaze still fixed on the view screen. This wasn't a defeat for them. It was an insult. They can't let it stand. Their entire philosophy was built on the idea of unassailable authority. That authority had just been shattered. Power that cannot be questioned will eventually break itself upon a truth it cannot comprehend. We can't run, Eris Thorne, stated, his voice now steady, the initial shock replaced by a profound sense of purpose. Even if we had the fuel, where would we go? It knows us. We're connected to it now. To leave would be to abandon the single most important discovery in human history. He looked at Rostova, his eyes pleading. We can't let it fall into their hands. They see a weapon. I see a teacher. It is a teacher of hard lessons, Rostova agreed. She turned from the screen to face her crew. The weight of their gazes was a familiar burden, but this time it felt different. It was not just the crew of the Vigilance looking to her for answers. It felt as if a part of the ancient vessel behind them was listening too. Our mission has changed. We are no longer an exploration vessel. We are this entity's first point of contact, its de facto guardians. She let that sink in. Helios opened a secure channel to Admiral Quinn at Sector Command. Highest priority fleet mind to fleet mind encryption. No voice, just data. Admiral Quinn is a traditionalist commander, Helios noted. He may not respond favorably to a report of this magnitude without your personal verification. He'll get it, Rostova assured the AI. But first I want him to see the raw data, the Ledger's awakening, the Concordiate's unprovoked attack, the reflection. She still didn't have a better word for it, and its actions now. Show him the Ringworld's reconstruction. Show him the rescue of the refugee transport. Let the facts build the case before I say a single word. A truth presented without context can be mistaken for a lie. Transmitting now, Helios confirmed. A stream of encrypted data containing the most monumental secrets the galaxy had known in eons flowed out from the small ship, a whisper in the interstellar void. While the data packet sped towards the heart of the Interstellar Authority, a junior archivist on Concordiate Prime, a young woman named Lyra, was tasked with compiling the after-action report from the Tartarus Maw. The initial telemetry was a mess of corrupted files and panicked, truncated voice logs. But as she pieced it together, a knot of ice formed in her stomach. The report showed the unassailable verdict firing its main cannon. And then it showed the cannon's energy signature impossibly striking the unassailable verdict. It was a logical paradox. It was a ghost in the machine of their perfect, orderly fleet. Her superiors were calling it a new form of electronic warfare, a devastating attack by a rogue human warship. Lyra, looking at the clean, unaltered physics of the telemetry, knew that was a lie. The record did not lie. It simply waited to be read. Admiral Quinn's reply came faster than Rostova expected. It was not a fleet-mind data stream. It was a personal voice call. His weathered face appearing on the main screen. He looked older than she remembered, the lines around his eyes, deeper. He was a man who carried the weight of 1,000 difficult decisions. Eva, he began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. I've seen the data. I've had Helios's counterpart here run every simulation we have. Nothing we possess can explain what I'm looking at. He paused, his gaze intense. Tell me in your own words. What is it? It calls itself the Argent Ledger, Admiral. Rostova replied, her voice steady. It appears to be an ancient adjudicator. It judged us and it judged the Concordiate. It seems to operate on a principle of absolute balance. It doesn't attack. It returns. It doesn't punish. It corrects. It corrected Executor Kalen into a cloud of vaporized hull plating. Quinn countered, his tone sharp. The Concordiate is screaming bloody murder. They're claiming you've activated a doomsday weapon, that you ambushed their fleet in violation of every treaty we have. They're demanding your immediate surrender and the ceding of your ship and its weapon to their authority for containment. We fired no shots, Admiral Lee interjected from his station, his voice tight with indignation. Quinn held up a hand. I know, Lieutenant. The data is clear. But the truth is not the story that's being told. The Concordiate is painting you as a war criminal, Eva, and they're moving a battle group to the Tartarus sector. Not a fleet. A battle group. 3 flagships, 30 cruisers. They're not coming to file a complaint. They're coming to execute a sentence. Politics is the art of turning a fact into a weapon. The stark reality of their situation settled on the bridge. They were one ship low on fuel against a tidal wave of righteous fury. What are your orders? Admiral Rostova asked, though she already knew the answer. Quinn's expression was grim. Officially, the Interstellar Authority is opening a formal inquiry. We are dispatching a diplomatic convoy. You are to hold your position and avoid any escalation. He leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping. Unofficially, Eva, you're on your own. The politicians are terrified. The Concordiate has the legal and political leverage to tie this up in committees until their battle group arrives and solves the problem for them. I can't send you reinforcements without starting a war. It was the answer she expected and the one she dreaded. They were being cut loose, sacrificed on the altar of political expediency. I understand, Admiral, she said. I don't think you do. Quinn said, a flicker of something like regret in his eyes. They're not just sending ships, Ava. They've issued a galactic warrant. For you. For the murder of Executor Kalen and 12,000 Concordiate officers. The law in the wrong hands is just a sharper kind of sword. The transmission ended, leaving Quinn's grim face seared into their minds. Rostova stood in silence, the condemnation of an entire galactic power settling on her shoulders. She was no longer a commander. She was an outlaw, a heretic, a scapegoat. So that's it then, Lee said, his voice dangerously low. We're the enemy now. We are the truth, Thorne corrected him softly. And the truth is often treated as the enemy by those who thrive on lies. It was then that the Argent Ledger spoke in their minds again. It had been silent during their exchange, a passive observer. Now its chorus of voices filled their consciousness, calm and resonant. We have monitored the transmission. We have accessed the public data networks of your civilization and the one that calls itself the Concordiate. The imbalance is greater than we perceived. Their ledger is not merely written in red. It is the foundation of their power structure. A foundation of inaccuracies, omissions, and unbalanced exchanges. The silver lines on the ledger's hull began to glow with a new intensity. The work on the ring world paused. The monolith's full attention was now turned outward towards the galactic plane. A new purpose was gathering within it. They have issued a judgment against you, Commander Eva Rostova, the voice continued. They have used their flawed ledger to declare you a debtor. It is a miscalculation, a profound one. One does not balance a book by tearing out the pages you dislike. One balances a book by revealing all of its entries. A wave of energy different from before began to emanate from the ledger. It was not a physical force. It was a wave of pure information, a signal of unparalleled complexity and reach. It moved at a speed that made light seem sluggish, propagating through subspace, through the quantum foam, touching every data network, every comms buoy, every ship's computer in the known galaxy. It was not a hack. It was a universal key unlocking every record, every file, every hidden annex and sealed testament. A species that fears its own history is a species that has already lost its future. We are the Argent Ledger, the voice declared, a statement that was now being heard by trillions of beings on thousands of worlds. We were built to remember, to count, to witness. The Concordiate has built its authority upon a redacted history. We shall now provide the unabridged edition. And then it began. The Universal Audit. Across the galaxy, screens flickered. On Concordiate Prime, the grand hollows in the Hall of Mandates stuttered. The pristine, heroic history of the Concordiate's founding fathers was suddenly overlaid with new information. Treaties appeared on screen, but now the secret codicils were visible, showing the predatory terms forced upon fledgling colonies. The official records of sanctified reclamations were supplemented with the original frantic distress calls from the ships and stations they had salvaged. Economic reports showing centuries of prosperity were annotated with the flow of wealth from exploited systems, the real cost of their empire displayed for all to see. It was not an attack. It was a citation. Every claim the Concordiate had ever made was now being fact-checked in real time with irrefutable proof. Every law they cited as justification for their actions was now shown alongside the records of the times they themselves had broken it for their own gain. The ledger was cross-referencing their entire history against the objective truth of recorded space-time. It was a weapon made of pure context. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Helios's processors were running at their absolute limit, trying to comprehend the scale of what was happening. Commander, the AI stated, its voice strained. The ledger is broadcasting a complete, verifiable history of the Concordiate to every receiver in the galaxy. It is dismantling their legitimacy, not with force but with facts. The economic fallout is already beginning. Stock markets on Concordiate-controlled worlds are crashing. Member systems are formally demanding clarification. The foundation of their authority is dissolving. Rostova watched her heart pounding. This was the Ledger's second lawful act. It was not an attack on ships or people. It was an attack on a lie. A vast galaxy-spanning lie that had propped up an empire for centuries. The mirror had been shown to a single fleet before. Now a ledger was being opened for the entire galaxy to read. True justice does not require a sword. It requires only a light bright enough to see by. The Concordiate's response was frantic. They tried to shut down their networks to erect firewalls. It was like trying to dam a tsunami with a picket fence. The Ledger's data was not flowing through their systems. It was a fundamental property of the systems themselves. It was the truth, and the truth could not be blocked. Their desperate attempts only made them look more guilty. Aboard the new Concordiate flagship, the Iron Precedent Grand Executor Varric watched his empire crumble in a cascade of data. He was a hard man, harder even than Kalen, a true believer in the Concordiate's civilizing mission. He saw this not as a revelation, but as an attack the most insidious one imaginable. It was a poison of the mind, a mimetic weapon that was turning his own people against him. His authority, once absolute, was now being questioned in 1,000 different systems. He had to act. "They can't fight the signal," his communications officer reported, his voice shaking. "It's everywhere." "Then we will not fight the signal." Varric snarled, his eyes fixed on a tactical map. "We will kill the broadcaster." His finger stabbed at the map at the single point of light that was the vigilance. This Rostova and her demon machine are the source. She thinks she can judge us. We will show her the price of heresy. Send the 3rd and 5th battle groups. All ships. Their target is not the artifact. Their target is the human ship. Erase it from existence. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who consort with chaos. A cornered beast does not care for the law. It cares only for the kill. The news of the Concordiate's mobilization reached the vigilance within the hour. Helios displayed their trajectory on the main screen. 2 entire battle groups converging on their position. Over 60 cruisers, a dozen flagships. It was not a force meant for battle. It was a force meant for extermination. "They're ignoring the Ledger," Lee said, his face grim. "They're coming for us." Varric knows he can't win the information war, so he's changing the narrative. Brave Concordiate fleet destroys rogue commander and her alien superweapon. It's a desperate final gambit, Thorne added. If they destroy us, they can claim they stopped the threat. They can try to rebuild their narrative from the ashes. Rostova looked at the approaching fleets. Her small ship was a gnat before a hurricane. The Ledger was powerful, but it had shown no offensive capability beyond reflecting an enemy's own attack. Against a fleet that knew not to fire on it and to focus only on the vigilance, what would it do? Was its doctrine so rigid that it would allow its allies, its stewards, to be destroyed? The cost of an ideal is paid by those who choose to uphold it. Helios, Rostova asked, her voice quiet. "What are our chances? If we stand and fight, our chance of survival is 0%, the AI replied without hesitation. If we attempt to flee, given our fuel state, they will overtake us in 17 minutes. Our chance of survival in that scenario is 0. The cold numbers hung in the air, a death sentence. "So we fight," Lee said, a grim smile on his face. He began arming their few torpedoes and charging their railguns. "We make them pay for every inch of space." Rostova held up a hand. "No." She turned to face the empty space where she felt the Ledger's presence. She spoke aloud, not knowing if it would understand the words or just the intent. "We will not be the cause of more death. We came here to understand, not to fight a war." She projected her thoughts, her resolve, her question towards the ancient intelligence. Is there another way, a way that does not require bloodshed? The chorus of voices in her mind was calm, but there was a new undertone, a note of something ancient and unyielding. The Concordiat's ledger is drenched in the red of violent conquest. Their final entry will be written in the same ink. They have chosen their method of accounting. The voice paused, and for the first time Rostova felt a sense of instruction. But the choice of the debtor does not define the actions of the creditor. We do not destroy. We do not kill. We foreclose. On the main screen, the tactical display shifted. Helios overlaid a new set of data that was flowing directly from the ledger. It was a complete schematic of every Concordiat ship in the approaching fleets. Not just their design specifications, but their current real-time status. Their power levels, their shield frequencies, their ammunition counts, and something else. A list of components. Every nut, every bolt, every conduit, every focusing crystal in every ship was being catalogued. And beside each component was its origin, its bill of sale, its transport history, its mining record. The Concordiat builds its fleet with the resources of 1,000 worlds, the ledger's voice explained. Many of those resources were not acquired in equitable trade. They were taken. Debts were incurred. We are a ledger. We remember all debts. Beams of silver light, impossibly thin and precise, shot out from the argent ledger. They did not target the ships themselves. They moved past them, through them, ignoring hulls and shields as if they were not there. They were not energy weapons. They were something else, a form of targeted matter-energy conversion. Aboard the Concordiat flagship, Iron Precedent, Grand Executor Varric was on the verge of giving the order to fire when a strange shudder ran through his ship. An alarm blared from engineering. "What is it?" he roared. "Sir, the primary focusing crystals for the main cannon." "They're gone," the engineering officer cried in disbelief. "They've just vanished." Across the fleet, similar reports were flooding every bridge. A vital cooling conduit here. A shield emitter's primary coil there. The guidance fins on their entire stock of torpedoes. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply gone. Reclaimed. Every component that had been mined from a world under an unjust treaty, every piece of technology stolen, under the guise of salvage, every warhead built with unpaid labor was being repossessed. The cost of empire was being deducted, piece by painful piece. The fleets a moment ago, a symbol of terrifying power, were now rendered impotent. Their guns were silent. Their shields flickered and died. Their engines sputtered as critical components were removed from the equation. They were hollowed out, their martial strength revealed to be a house of cards built on a foundation of theft. The ledger had not fought them. It had audited them. The great ships of the Concordiat battle groups floated dead in space, their crews staring in stunned disbelief at their suddenly inert consoles. They were not defeated. They were foreclosed upon. The final, perfect, lawful act. A debt recorded in darkness had been paid in the stark, revealing light. The Vigilance was low on fuel, its hull scarred from the nebula's corrosive dust. They had faced down an empire and survived. The cost was their anonymity, their simple place in the galaxy. They were now forever tied to the Argent Ledger and the new era it had begun. The Concordiat was broken, its power structure collapsing under the weight of its own history. New alliances would form. New powers would rise. But the precedent had been set. The truth was now a strategic asset, and the galaxy had a new and very particular form of accountant. Rostova stood on her bridge watching the crippled armada drift. Her crew was silent, the hum of their own ship's life support, a comforting, familiar sound. She had been a soldier, an explorer. Now she was something else, a steward of the balance. Her doubt had been forged into a terrible, beautiful certainty. She had a new duty not to a flag, but to the very concept of a fair accounting. The work was just beginning. The galaxy was a large book with many, many pages yet to be balanced. Helios rerouted the last of their reserve power to the main view screen, displaying a message from Admiral Quinn. It was simple. The Interstellar Authority formally recognizes the Argent Ledger as a sovereign sentient entity. We propose a joint stewardship with you, Commander Rostova, as primary liaison. The age of ledgers has begun. On the obsidian hull of the ancient ship, outside the silver spiral sigil, pulsed with a slow, steady, eternal light. A new law had come to the galaxy. It was not a law of conquest or of statute, but a law of causality of truth. It was a law that said all debts would be paid, all accounts would be balanced one way or another. And it was a law that would be remembered not by the collars it placed on the guilty, but by the simple, irrefutable clarity of the numbers it wrote across the stars. The universe does not forgive, it merely balances.